a very engaging conversation that I hope you guys participate with us in a little bit later on. But with no further ado, let's jump into things, everyone. My name is Brandon Hummins, and I'm part of Hummins Consulting, but most importantly, I am leading this webinar series called Humanizing Procurement with ISM-Chicago. So the entire foundation of why we started the series and why we are calling you all here today is because we want to put the human element of the way that we do business back into the world of procurement. What does this mean for us? Procurement's the buying side of the economy. All those that sell things are on the selling side. Then there's all that happens in between. Because of this, there's a certain level of importance that we should place on treating our interactions like we're people. This whole thing for me started from an idea from a couple years ago, where my wife and we went on vacation together. And when I got back to work on a Tuesday, my supervisor walked over to me and said, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I'm messaging back all my stakeholders, checking in with projects. And he says, "Oh, well, for that one project that you're about to check in, that person you're working with, she actually passed away when you're on vacation. You're going to be working with Jim now on that." And then he walked away. And for me, that was extremely impactful. I said, I knew this person. I knew, she talked about her children. She talked about her vacation plans. She talked about all the stuff that happens outside of our 9 to 5. And so many of us are deeply connected to the work that we do and the way that we contribute to society and our own lives. And in my opinion, the reason I got into procurement was to help people. Our entire job is enabling our stakeholders to do their jobs better. And if that doesn't get any more human, I don't know what does. So all of the themes in our series have been around the ideas of where procurement is headed into the future. How do we interact with each other on a more personal level? And today, one of the very hot topics that we have, as you all may know, is around AI's impact to procurement practices. So I don't do this alone, everyone. I'm not an expert in all things procurement. I know a lot, but there's a lot of people that know a lot more than me. So I brought in an expert on this subject to really walk us through, and then we're going to have the opportunity to have a very vibrant and intriguing discussion after. So the first 30 minutes, everyone, first 25, 30 minutes, Alan Rice is going to be presenting and walking us through the entire landscape of AI in the procurement space. Now, remember, AI is a big topic, everyone. We are going to hone in on the corner that focuses on procurement. That's why we're all here today. So when we do get to the question section, make sure that you're asking questions not just about AI, but AI and procurement and the way that we do business. Now, we will get into deeper conversations about what that means for the human part of our roles in our society. But overall, we're going to have a focused and engaging conversation around the future and what's to come. So Alan Rice, we chose him for a very specific reason. He's not only smart, but he is someone who is driving the future thought leadership of not just AI and procurement, but many other risk mitigation factors of the procurement world. He is a managing director at Cachet Procurement, and he is one of the smartest people that I know when it comes to helping us understand the foundational elements of procurement practices in the space there. So I've done enough talking. I'm actually going to go on mute, and you won't see my face for a while. I'm going to pass it on over to you, Alan, and tell us a little bit about what you'll be talking about, and then dive right in whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Brandon, for that humbling intro. I appreciate it. So thank you, everybody, for your time today. So what I put together for you is a little bit of some information about how did we get here, right? And talk about the latest version of AI, because when you talk about AI, it's very expansive. But we're going to be talking about generative AI, which is really the explosion that's happened over the last year and a half. Then I'll walk you through some basically potential use cases, and I might even be able to answer some questions about what actually is out there and functioning today, and what's doable, and get you to see the direction this is going, and it's moving very quickly. So I've been in procurement for about 30 years now. I've probably had just about every role inside of procurement, but over the last handful of years, I've really focused on the technology piece of it. And over the last couple of years, very much on the AI, because it's going to impact not only procurement, but companies and society as a whole. So this is one of these situations where you need to get on the train before the train leaves the station. So let me walk you through a little bit So most of you who have a decent procurement background, you're going to recognize a lot of these logos, right? So procurement technology kind of really kicked off in, I would say, early to mid 90s when companies like Ariba came around. So I remember, for example, when I saw Ariba in the mid to late 90s for the first time, I thought to myself, if I don't learn this, then I'm going to have to be finding myself a new job because of how impactful I saw it at the time that we were automating the purchasing function, right? Where we could do e-procurement. Since then, it's been just nonstop changes. Um, in the early 2000s was the dot-com era where there was an explosion of procurement tech. A lot of it doesn't exist nowadays. A lot of it consolidated with other companies, and you end up seeing exactly what what you're seeing here, which is the survivors. Okay, so a lot of the early a lot of the early tech were suites like Ariba, right? That it did e-procurement, it did e-sourcing, it did payments. And as you can see, a lot of these names, they're still around today. But as soon as you get into the, you cross that threshold around 2020, things start to change. And you start seeing different type of technology. And let me get you, if this thing wants to move, let's see. There we go. So just a step back from the artificial intelligence timeline, the term itself was coined back in 1955, I believe. And since then, it's continued to progress in different aspects. And we've seen news, like when the Deep Blue computer won, the chess game against Gary Kasparov back in '97, I think it was. Then we saw robots like from Sony come around in '99, and of course, who could forget the Roomba, vacuum cleaner in the early 2000s. And then from then on, we started seeing virtual assistants pop up, right? Siri, Alexa, the Google Assistant, on and on. They still weren't all that intelligent, but they were exactly what the word says. It was a virtual assistant. In the 2020 range, they started to work on generative AIs that were really useful, but they weren't public. Most folks who had seen these things is because they worked at a tech company that was developing them. It wasn't until late 22 that ChatGPT went public, and then it just exploded into the consciousness of everyone. You're kind of hard pressed nowadays to find somebody who hasn't heard the name ChatGPT. They may not be using it, but they've heard it. So this is just a little bit of the history here of these generative AIs, and I'm going to explain to you what that means in a moment. ChatGPT 3 was what you saw when they launched it publicly towards the end of 22. But really quickly after that, in early 23, they launched ChatGPT 4, and that was a game changer. Now you've got a generative AI that you can ask it normal language questions. It will understand you, and it will respond to you. And so it was like having a conversation with a human being. And in fact, as you learn to engage with it, it becomes more human in its interactions with you to a point where you don't really recognize that you're speaking to a chatbot. So generative AI, we talk about artificial intelligence, but there's many types, right? So artificial intelligence, as I said, was coined a long time ago. You heard over the last handful of years, machine learning, right? Where these artificial intelligence solutions can learn. And so from more use, more data, they learn. Then you got to the next level, which was deep learning. Deep learning is basically a methodology that has taught the AI to think like humans, okay? Neural networks. And so that is the process of how the artificial intelligence kind of comes to a conclusion. And now you've got generative AI, like ChatGPT for text, or you have Midjourney for generating images, and you've got, well, it says here Bard, but Google just changed the name to Gemini. But those are the most popular ones out there. So generative AI, by its very name, is it will generate content for you. And for us in procurement, what does that mean? It will write contracts for you. It can generate RFIs and RFPs if you give it the right information. So before, when we would have to, for example, generate an RFP for a purchase that we'd never done before, right? Some goods or some services that we've never done, we start looking around to see if somebody's got a template, right? Because we don't want to build it from scratch because it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. So, but nowadays, the AI has a significant amount of knowledge. So you can tell it, I want you to write an RFP for the following subject. You give it its parameters of what you're looking for, and a few moments later, it generates the entire RFP for you. So that's a simple use case study that any of you could do right now with ChatGPT or any of the other public generative AIs out there. This is an example of what you can do with a generative AI. This photo here that you see is all generated by AI, including the photograph. It was generated, I believe, in Midjourney, and you basically give it the prompt that you're looking for, and basically the prompt means the question, how you structure the question. So the question here was basically, I want a robotic head and portrait with no background of an artificial intelligence. It's got to be minimalistic and aesthetically white, futuristic, digital, and realistic in 4K. That is basically the prompt you gave to the AI, and Midjourney generated this photograph. So if any of you have interest in playing with this stuff, you can access DALL-E and Midjourney easily online. And they also have plugins, if you will, with ChatGPT for those of you that are using ChatGPT. Now, generative AI and procurement. So here are some areas of use cases, as I spoke before, for engaging business partners. So I think what's important to note is with AI today, you have to look at it from two major swim lanes. One is augmentation, or what they like to call nowadays co-pilot. And you've got automation, where you're having the AI actually automate a process, in essence, making its own decisions. Augmentation, very common. It assists, it truly is a personal assistant. And we'll walk through some use cases in a moment of that. And then automation could take a lot of the tactical, transactional type activities that occur today in procurement and could automate the entire process. So whether you're engaging with a business partner where you want to launch some sourcing exercises, or you want to use an AI in your intake engine, so the business partner is asking for something, the AI can provide that. So for example, your business partner might ask, I need to buy a certain service. Do we have a vendor that provides that service? So instead of having to find somebody in procurement to answer that question, the AI would answer it because you've given the AI access to your vendor database and whatever other information you want to give it, and can answer that question. Now, let's say you don't have it. The AI could say, well, we don't have a vendor for that. Would you like to initiate a sourcing exercise? So the person says yes. The AI will go to the next step, which is depending on how much you've automated. It may go and start doing market research and identify vendors to invite to an RFI or an RFP, or it might hand it off to a sourcing manager or a category manager to do it. So it kind of depends where you are in your cycle as to what you want the AI to do. You can use it for communications. You can use it for managing your, the supplier's performance. These are all typical use cases, right? Um, Talent management, that's a huge area for AI now. Um, all of the talent management companies out there are working hard on getting their AIs ready and compliant to go. Some of the big companies like Randstad already have it. And the only limitation they have is that the regulations and laws in certain states haven't caught up yet to this AI world. So they're held back for doubts around bias in the selection process. But what you will see in a future is a future in talent management where people who go and submit a resume, that resume online is going to be reviewed by an AI, which today a lot of them are. But the AI will make the decision as to whether they want to screen you or not. They'll set up an interview. You will actually have a discussion with a generative AI who will make the decision if you're qualified. And at that point, it'll be either the AI or it'll be an individual who's going to make the final decision to extend a job offer. So we're going to reach in the not too distant future a moment where an AI, you won't even speak to a human being before your first day of work. So even though that sounds crazy, it's going in that direction. For procurement, contract management, category management, all of that area has got huge use cases for it. There's lots of tech out there already that's using cognitive AI and generative AI to read contracts, generate contracts, redline them, highlight risks, do all that. So your contracting process that today takes weeks or months could now take days or hours, depending on the contract.
Process.
So let me jump to the next. Again, here's more use cases for you. I'm sure you'll recognize some of the areas of opportunity here. But what I've found is that AIs can be used, for example, to review RFP results. So we're all accustomed to using tools like Ariba that's going to do a comparative analysis of the responses, but it tends to be a little clunky because it returns something that looks more like an Excel table that you still have to read. Whereas a generative AI can read all the results and you can ask it normal natural language questions that can be answered. Who's got the best price? Who's got this? Who's got that? Who doesn't have this? You can ask it questions like that without having to look at a table. You'll be able to have it review invoices. You'll be able to have the AI take a look at, for example, payment terms in your master, payment terms in the contract, in the PO, and in the invoice, and highlight discrepancies so that you fix leakage that you have from a savings perspective through inconsistent payment terms. Okay, so on and on. We could sit here all day figuring out use cases. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, by the way, isn't technology for tomorrow. It's technology for today that's out there and that you can contract right now. There are very few tech companies in the procurement space that are not actively enabling generative AI in their solutions. And so if they don't do it, they're likely not to survive. That's how important this change is. So as I said earlier, you've got two areas, right? Augmentation and automation. Or if you think of augmentation as having your own personal advisor. And so this is where you can use an AI to help you generate PowerPoints, read Excels, generate RFPs, review contracts, give you summaries. So again, it all depends on what you need. So it's like having that smart, intelligent assistant sitting on your shoulder at all times. There are tools out there, for example, that will create category management strategies in about 90 minutes that typically will take you 3 to 5 months to build. when you're having to build a comprehensive strategy for a large category that includes things like STPs and SWOT analysis and quarters by forces and everything that you typically do to build a strategy. These AIs can do them in about 90 minutes. So now you're looking at the ability to not be an expert in every category, but just be an expert in the process and have the assistance of the AI to to provide that deep category knowledge, and at the same time to be training you and making you that expert in those categories. When you jump to the next level, which is the automation, now you're talking about actual content generation and actions being taken. So you could, for example, once a contract is loaded, and you could have the AI generate and send a PO automatically. So that's one example of an action. But generally, what you're seeing is this rise of an intelligent procurement now, where we really have access to data and expert help through an AI to accelerate it. Okay, because what's important in today's world now is speed. Okay, I'm sure you all lived through this, right? Your stakeholder reaches out to you and says, "I need help to source the following items." And now you have to go and you have to find the vendors, you have to contact the vendors, you have to do RFIs, RFPs. You got to follow your normal 7-step sourcing process, which can take weeks or months, depending on the category. Well, how many of your stakeholders want to sit around for weeks or months waiting for results? They don't. You're lucky if you get a couple of weeks or 3 of patience while they're waiting for you. This is where you get your business stakeholders going off on their own and purchasing or contracting whatever they need because they can't wait on procurement. So speed is the new currency. And the way for us to do things faster is using these generative AIs to make us smarter and faster. Okay. Hurdles, well, typical ones that you're going to think of, right? Technology and and data. So all of these systems require good data, right? If you feed the AI bad data, it will give you bad answers. So you have to spend the time and the money to fix your data. That's super important. It's talent and culture. Not every company's culture is ready to embrace AI, and especially embrace it as fast as it needs to occur. And a lot of procurement organizations don't have the right talent, the right skill set to do this shift. So there's a lot of reticence there. It's also really hard for procurement to build an ROI around the benefits, right? You can say, I can do things faster, I can do them smarter. And we all know that time is money, but it's really hard to sit down and put together an ROI that says, by implementing Gen AI, we're going to save X dollars. That's still a problem. And then you've got this trust deficit with AI. The people still don't trust it, don't trust its outcomes. And that's not going to go away anytime soon. But the things that you read in the news around trust and bias and hallucinations, which basically means it's coming back and giving you the wrong information, it's all known. It's all being addressed. All the companies that work in this space are addressing these issues, and you're going to see changes and improvements. So if you have an opinion about AI and it's more than 6 months old, it's probably already changed. That's how fast it's moving. So with that, I want to make sure we give everybody enough time, for any questions that you may have. And I want to just take a step back here and Brandon, see if we've got any questions coming our way.
We actually do have a question. So first of all, thank you so much for that, Alan. Some of the things that you said, really, as a practitioner myself, I think about it all the time. Like, one of the main concepts was, how do you get more strategic time back into your day? And when I was leading a team, I did a time analysis with that team, and I said, well, how much time are we spending doing what I would just, kind of consider value add tasks? And for me, that was, obviously helping out our stakeholders. But as they were coming in, a lot of our questions would be around, do we have a contract in place, or where's this contract, or where's this PO? It was a lot of remedial questions that I felt, hey, we're spending so much time and effectively a lot of money on this as well. So we got a few questions, Alan, that came in. Do you want to start with audience questions, or do you want to start with some of the other questions that we discussed before? I'll kind of leave it up to you in terms of the direction you want to go in with that.
Maybe we want to go with the audience to make sure that we give them the opportunity to get their questions answered.
Sure, we can do that. All right, so let's start with Stuart Andrews, who says, hey, this is a pretty basic question. ChatGPT is a public platform, and everything entered into ChatGPT is public domain. How do the procurement software companies build a private AI model?
Good question. OpenAI already has ChatGPT as a private behind the firewall. So the one you use is the public one, but they already are selling their product into companies. In fact, I'm actually working on a project right now where they're rolling ChatGPT out as their, let's call it their assistant, their intake assistant. And so it's out there. It's doable. You just engage them like any other vendor to start the process. And then with all of these generative AIs, it just depends what you want it to do. But the more information you feed it from more platforms, the more it can do for you, right? So if you want to give it vendor information, you want to give it access to your contract repository so it can answer a simple question. Hey, do we have a contract with Grainger? It can instantly come back, yes, we do, right? And it can follow up with more questions. What do you need to do? Right. So I hope that answered your question.
Let's hope so. And then, Stuart, if you have any follow-up, please feel free to ask that. It seems that quite a few people liked Stuart's question out there. The next one, I'm going to combine a few questions here because it seems like we're asking somewhat of the same thing. So this one is from Nadine, and then Pam, and a few others have asked this. What companies do you know about, Alan, that are currently utilizing AI in their procurement software? And I'll answer this a little bit because I've been doing a lot of research along the way. Some of the ones that I'm familiar with are Zip, Palantir, and Softtech. So those are the three companies so far that I'm sure are utilizing AI in their procurement software. Other ones that are out there are planning on getting into it. And one of the things that Alan said, though, is if you're planning on it, you might already be too late. If it's not already there, your competition's kind of beating you. And I've reviewed quite a few companies out there, Focal Point, Coupa, Ariba. They're all planning to implement AI a little bit more in the future, but a lot of the strategies from many companies are let other people do it first, figure out all of the bumps that might occur on the road, and then as some of the larger companies, then they want to introduce AI. But I'll pause there. Alan, what are your thoughts on some of the companies out there that you think people maybe should look into or consider? And obviously, we're not sponsored by any company. We're all practitioners.
Right.
But yeah, Alan, what are your thoughts there?
So recently, I think it was back in October or so, that I went to the Digital Procurement World in Amsterdam. And it is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a conference, but focused on procurement tech. I'd say 90% of the companies, and there were well in excess of 100 companies there, all had AI enabled into their tools. And when I mean AI enabled, I mean they're already functioning, but it's constant work to improve it and expand it. So in the market research and discovery area, where, like, for example, you need to find vendors very quickly and get real-time trends and market analysis, there are companies like Scoutbee and 4th Street that are doing amazing things, right? 4th Street, for example, is a tool that allows you to do a real-time market analysis. So when you need to discover vendors, figure out who has those goods or that service that you need, and prepare an RFP, you can do it in minutes. It uses a generative AI to basically scour the internet and come back with that information, and then it will enhance it through other feeds that it has through market intelligence that it purchases to give you this information. So The stuff that you typically would take weeks to do, you do it in about 90 minutes. Same story with Scout B. Then you've got tools like iCertis in contract management that has a generative AI already in place to generate agreements, to review agreements, to identify risk. It's already there. There's another one that's really interesting called Certuo. Certuo is a category management tool. It's what I explained to you before. You would go to the AI and you would say, I need to do a category strategy for marketing, specifically agency of record. And the AI will start asking you questions. And then it will, in about an hour and a half, you will generate a fully fleshed out category strategy with, quarters, five forces. It does all of that kind of stuff for you. A lot of these companies that I'm mentioning to you are already being used by some of the Fortune 200 companies. Like this last one, Certuo, is used at Walmart for an example.
And then, Alan, do you think that you can go
Yeah.
back to that other slide that kind of had that spectrum of different procurement tools? I think some of the names that you may have mentioned were on that slide. I think it was like way back in the beginning almost. I think
Yeah,
this would be a
you're
good
talking about
visual.
this one.
Yes, that one
Yeah.
there.
So here, let's see what we've got. Fair Markets has got some AI already enabled. Tealbook has some AI enabled as well. Taulia as well.
I see Zip on there,
iCertis
kind of
down
in
at the bottom. You've got Certuo here. 4th Street, I don't believe is here because it's newer. You've got Scout B. So a lot of the newer stuff, they've been around since the 2000s, but they've, kind of reinvented themselves by enabling AI.
Yeah. And then I'm also
Archlet.
seeing Fair Market on there as well. I think Fair Market has some AI capabilities too.
Yes, Fair Market also has a capability. So a lot of these do have it, but some of the early ones, like your point, Brandon, Ariba and Coupa, they're working on.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with some recent vendors that are well known who basically were telling me that they're still 8 to 12 months away.
Yeah.
And I told them they're very far behind if that's the case.
Yeah, and that's I got the same point. So like, for example, we see on here, and once again, Alan and I were not sponsored by any company, right? So we're practitioners that look at these tools and sometimes consider using them. I see one on here, Focal Point. So Focal Point, love the company, love what they're able to do, and love how flexible they are. But they were one of the companies that told me we are planning on getting AI involved in our process in the next 6 to 12 months or so. And they said, well, Brandon, if you can wait on making any sort of selection, I went through several RFPs for this type of tool in the past, very recently. And they said, if you can wait, we'll have those functions onboarded. But much like a lot of the other companies that you guys see on the slide here, if they didn't have it now, they kind of were behind if AI was one of the main requirements that we were looking at for a procurement tool. So I just wanted to point that out.
I will give some advice to the group here is when you're sourcing now tech of any kind, you should have as one of your prerequisites that it be AI enabled. Because if you don't, by the time you implement it and flip the switch on, it's obsolete already.
Yeah. So, Alan, I want to get to some of the other questions, if you don't mind, because fortunately, we have a lot of questions that came in. We may not even get to any of the pre-discussed questions, Alan. So the next one here is coming in from Chris Cooley. He asks around, well, I'll just read his question. Well, I want to rephrase this question slightly because I understand exactly what it's asking here. So like, let's say, Alan, we implement a tool, or rather the future, right, has a tool that we can implement that helps us actually negotiate contracts on our behalf, right? Let's say, for example, we're working in an environment where we have an in-house procurement team and then an AI procurement team that is doing things like helping us negotiate actual contracts. So what is the legal exposure that AI service providers have? Will we see companies like Google, because of Gemini and utilizing, if I'm utilizing Gemini to negotiate a contract and it has unfavorable outcomes to the customer, what happens? Will you predict that I have recourse? Will I be able to sue Google and Gemini for how they may have mishandled my contract utilizing their AI tools? What do you think is happening in that space in the future?
Actually, it's funny you should ask because I was actually on a call today exactly about that.
Cool.
So there's actually a tool out there. There's only one that I know of, and it's called Factum, and it is a generative AI that negotiates with vendors. So you program this AI, for example, to go out and negotiate payment terms, and you've fed it enough information for it to negotiate with you. So the way it works is that it sends an email to the vendor and invites them to a chat. And then while on the chat, the vendor starts talking to the chatbot. And the chatbot starts a standard negotiation, what we all know how it works, give and take. At the end of it, it can ask, do you have a boilerplate template contract that you would like to submit, or would you like to use ours? And at that point, you would have tied it to your contract management platform, which typically, and this has already been accepted by legal, you're going to have clause libraries, you're going to have templates. These tools have already been vetted legally for generating contract that works for you. So at this point, really all it's doing is handing off the contract to the vendor, and then you're going to start that redlining process. When it comes back, the solution, which is AI enabled. So let me use Icertis as an example. When it comes back, the AI for Icertis will highlight the risk areas in the contract so that procurement or legal goes straight to it to look at it. So you might think of it like a red, yellow, green. Everything, all the clauses that appear in green are acceptable per the configuration that you've given. Others may be in yellow, you should read. Others may be in red, which means you shouldn't accept, or you need to replace, or it's missing. Because that's the key for some of these AIs. It's easy to read something and decide it doesn't work for you. It's harder to identify that something doesn't exist and you need it there. So hypothetically speaking, you might see that you require a GDPR clause, right, for privacy due to business in Europe, and it's not there. The AI highlights it. So there's no doubt that the legal and regulatory is behind in a lot of this stuff, but you're not going to have any problems because for the moment, you're not giving complete autonomy to the AI. Right now, it is a partnership with most of the AIs that you see up there. They're your assistant. They're giving you summaries of the contract. And when they negotiate within the parameters. And it really is no different than negotiations, trainings that you've done where you walk in knowing, your best possible outcome, your fallback positions, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to accept. That's the same kind of information you're going to feed the chatbot. Right. And then it's just going to do the work for you. So as a practical example, I can tell you that I know of one company now that's using that chatbot for its tail spend and negotiating spot buys and negotiating payment terms. So it's out there. It's already functional. It's exploding, that particular tool.
So kind of what I'm, just so that I make sure that I'm understanding correctly, in these situations, let's say, for example, when we're thinking about the legal ramifications, your thoughts are never put an AI in the driver's seat fully when it comes to negotiating these contracts. It should still be like we have all the other tools. It should still be an assistant to us where we're driving the value, driving the conversation, where the AI is able to do some of the tactical stuff, right? If it's hard terms like payment terms or things of that nature that are clearly black and white, AI is good for that. But when it gets into a little bit more of the nuanced pieces where you kind of said before, there's a certain level of confidence setting, right? Green, yellow, or red. That's when we need to still have that procurement professional or legal or insurance or risk involved, because AI is more so bringing our attention to certain areas, making recommendations, and we still have to use our judgment, really putting the onus on us as a company, meaning, hey, we still made the decision. We wouldn't be able to go back and sue Gemini or one of these tools because it was still us making the choice. Does that kind of sum up that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of nuances in contracting. So for the most part, and it's going to be probably few more years still before we get comfortable with allowing AIs to do more. But for the most part, the AI, think of the AI as your paralegal. You know, if I was a lawyer, I'd be thinking of the AI as my paralegal. It's giving me a summary and it's highlighting the risks. So I don't have to read all 50 pages of that contract. I just have to read the areas that concern me.
Exactly.
But that's going to progress very quickly, right? I think the future is that, you know, when AIs become more common, you're going to have smaller contract legal departments at companies because you won't need so many people on staff. You'll have a few, again, for the nuances and certain complicated types of discussions.
Right.
But this stuff gets better exponentially faster.
Understandable. So let's think about that, and I think it directly relates to our next question here, because to me, this question is going to come from Sam Cagle, and I imagine this is around kind of marrying up some of the challenges that we face with AI to the actual business world, right? So his question is, what are the primary challenges businesses might face when integrating generative AI into their existing procurement systems? So let's say, for example, what if we're using a Coupa right now and we want to introduce generative AI? What are the challenges? What do we need to look out for? And I think that this question is very applicable to pretty much everyone on this call who may be thinking to themselves, I want to use AI. How do I do it? I'm scared. What do I need to watch out for?
Yeah, I think right now with generative AI, and obviously all of them know the standing that the Aribas, the Coupas, the Jaggers of the world have in the procurement marketplace, right? So they all have APIs into these solutions, but it's more of a handoff in the sense that you have two things you can do. You can start, for example, a sourcing exercise, and the AI hands you off to the Ariba guided buying module so that you can start the Ariba guided buying process, right? You can also use the AI, tie it into the backend data or information that exists in Ariba or in Coupa. So you ask, for example, what's the status of my PO, or is there a purchase order for this? So it really depends on the Coupas and the Aribas, which of their modules are they using, because they're suites, right? And they'll do anything from almost the intake all the way through to the payment. So as an advisor, the AI can can answer those simple questions for you. It's not going to be doing the execution of the tasks internally, but because those companies are working on their own AIs, what I envision is that your AI will do a handoff to their AI so that you continue following the process. Right. So you start saying, hey, I need you to create an RFP. Sure. For what? For the following thing. Here's vendors that you have in your database for that. Would you like to invite them? Yes. Right. And that's how the process would work. Right. So you could use a ChatGPT right now to do that handoff to Ariba, to Jagger, to Coupa to start the process. And it could be a handoff directly to whatever it is you need. The question's contract related. You're using the contract module for Ariba, it would hand you off straight to there.
Right. And so kind of going back to the other first part of this question in terms of primary challenges in your mind, some of these challenges may be disconnected systems where it's difficult for each module to communicate with each other. And we then need to overcome that challenge by understanding our processes and procedures better, and then connecting that process and inserting AI where appropriate into that. And if we're utilizing other technologies in either end of this process, we need to understand, I guess, how to, in that system, integrate AI so that it doesn't kind of fall apart, in a sense. Is there anything that you want to add to that or correct me on? I just want to make sure that we're kind of getting to some of the challenges.
It's data driven, right? If you have a data layer and that data layer is feeding your applications, and then you connect to the applications, that's great, right? Because there's certain activity that happens in the application and certain activity that's in the data layer or the data lake. Mm-hmm. But if you have disparate data, multiple systems, you don't have a data layer or a data lake, right? Somebody like a Tealbook, for example, on this screen does that, right? They create that data layer for you and then they maintain it. You don't have that, it makes the implementation of AI all that much more difficult.
Right. That makes sense. So let's move on to Patel's question here, with which is around what are some of the skills that the procurement community should develop in regards to understanding the world as it transforms with generative AI transformation? Like what do we need to do as procurement professionals to prepare for that world of tomorrow?
So one of the first things is there's something called prompt engineering. Okay. So prompt engineering is just a fancy word of how to ask the right question to get the right answer. Because AIs think in a certain way. They're similar to the human brain, but not exact. So if you ask the same question slightly differently, you will get two different answers from the AI.
Hmm.
So it's pretty easy in today's world to get yourself trained up on prompt engineering. And that will help you to ask the right questions so you get the right responses. So that's a simple thing. And there are so many places now online, even things like LinkedIn Learning gives you free classes on prompt engineering.
Mm.
Um, the other thing is start becoming comfortable with changes that occur fast. You know, the speed of change is hard for a lot of people to absorb. And so we're about to be in an environment where change is occurring. I don't want to say daily, but it's going to feel like that. And so you have to be really comfortable in an ambiguous environment where change is happening all the time. So those two skill sets, as funny as they sound, are actually really important. You've got to be open to change. You got to be flexible to the speed of change, and you can teach yourself how to ask the right questions. And so by just embracing this, now if you push back and feel that you can't accept an AI does a certain activity, then you're going to have a hard time. I mean, if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said the holy grail was an AI. It will not replace a procurement person in a face-to-face negotiation. Boy, was I wrong, right? It was when I saw an AI and I engaged with the AI to negotiate with it, it completely blew away my paradigm. And I said, I was wrong. An AI can negotiate.
Interesting. So let me ask this next question from Pam, if you don't mind, only because I want to make sure we have about 10 minutes left, everybody. I love how so many questions are coming in and we still have more to go. This is amazing to me. So Pam, I'm going to try to ask your question best I can, but verbal or written questions when we're thinking about the intake process for AI, which one is better? Tell us a little bit about companies that may be utilizing procurement AI and where do they really find success at? Right? So we're really trying to
Right.
focus in on not the companies that are offering the procurement tools now, but the ones that are using it. And then how are they really finding value out of those tools in a practical sense? Are they having people jump on calls with AI, or are they having them, kind of speak some of their questions, or are they having them just type it into a chat bot? Are they having an intake form that then gets transferred over into that AI space? What's working for companies right now? And what, in your opinion, are some of the best models that we should consider?
Right. So for right now, most of them are using the chat format, the written format. Almost all of the AIs now have a natural language engine on them, so you can speak to them, but you have to activate it. The issue is that with most IT departments, they're not comfortable with the hardware infrastructure that you may have, the laptop, the desktop, with the audio capabilities, not to mention the load on the networks. So what they don't want is to have a bunch of help desk calls because their laptop audio won't work when they try to talk to the AI. So the chat function is the most common now, but typically all of them give you the option to activate audio. So when you speak to it, all it's really doing is translating the speech to text, and that's how the AI is understanding it. I mean, you guys can see this in something as simple as dictation in Microsoft Word. If you activate it, it's pretty good. You can just speak to it and it will type out whatever you're saying. So it's the same idea with AI, right? You can do that. I
Mhm.
think you're going to see more and more um, um, audio AIs where they're already functioning and it's hard to tell the difference, is in the call center space, where companies have built AIs where the voice is almost indistinguishable from a human,
Yeah.
and the interaction is it's very human-like in the sense that, Brandon, you call the help desk about something and it recognizes your caller ID and it says, "Hey, Brandon, hey, did you see the game last night?" Right? It might just banter with you.
Yeah. Can I ask a
And
quick question about that before
yeah,
we go on to the next question? So, like, let's say, for
yeah.
example, with that experience, what regulations are around managing the AI for that experience? And for example, I'm familiar, kind of, I get ads all the time for exactly what you just talked about. Like, it'll say, "Hey, Brent, it's conversational AI." But I saw something recently that said there are laws in place that the person on the other side has to know that they're talking to an AI. I haven't done all the
Yeah.
research in that space yet, but what's your familiarity with stuff, things in that area? And then
Yeah,
also, we do
they
have two more questions that I want to make sure we get to as well from the audience. But go on, Alex.
you're absolutely right. They have to identify themselves, just like you're starting to see companies say that they're going to be publishing photographs that identify as being generated by AI. So yes, for now, legally, they have to identify that you're not talking to a human.
Mhm,
And or if you ask the question, are you human or are you a chatbot? It has to respond correctly, right? It has to say, hey, I'm a chatbot.
mhm. Interesting. All right. This next question is coming in from Allison Hayes. How are you doing, Allison? But how do you address terms on AI data use in supplier tools, specifically when they use our data in training data for their model? And she points out, especially when you work in a highly regulated area, student data in K-12 in her case, but she can also think how this could be a concern in the financial services industry as well. You know, financial services and a lot of other legal services spaces have extreme data protection laws, especially when it comes to sharing data, how to use it. I'm actually building out a course right now on the value of data and how to understand a price point, or how to understand how to put a price point on your data value. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how do we address that collaboration between these AI tools where they may be ingesting our data to become better, but we may not be permitted to allow for it, but we still want to use the tool? What do we do in situations like that?
Well, you're right. I mean, that's what hindered for the last handful of months companies getting off the ground with some of these AI tools, until the Googles and the open AIs started to provide their generative AIs behind the firewall. So they're built on what they call LLMs, large language models, right? And there are public LLMs and private LLMs. So what you're doing is you're building your own private LLM. You're feeding it your data. It's staying behind your firewall. You still own the data. Okay. It's not outside. So in essence, the generative AI is just reading it, interpreting it, and generating a response to your question, but it never left your four walls.
Mm,
Okay. That doesn't mean that you cannot configure it to have access points outside of your firewall, but they would have the same types of cyber controls that your IT would require when it goes outside for something, right? Make sure you don't release any intellectual property, that type of thing. They're working through all of that. As far as pricing on the data, honestly, I haven't seen a lot of discussions yet. I think it's still kind of up in the air as far as how the data piece of it's going to get priced out. But what I am saying is that financial institutions are already looking at it and already implementing it. You're seeing it in healthcare, pharma, life sciences. I'm seeing it already being implemented. Retail is way ahead of the curve
mhm.
on implementing. Companies like Walmart have just gone completely, full speed ahead with AI.
Right.
So yeah, let me give time for a few more questions if we
Sure.
have.
And then also, just to kind of summarize some of that. So part of what you're saying is, hey, we have data protection policies in other areas. Make sure those same policies are in place whenever we engage an AI model in any way, shape, or form. Our contracts should say, don't use our data for XYZ. If we don't allow for it, don't allow data to leave. All right, wonderful. So unfortunately, Kelly, I might not be able to get to your question, but Linda Casper has one question. Are companies having challenges with the accuracy of data in current systems such as Ariba, and what steps should companies take to cleanse that data. And to me, I kind of want to expand that into terms of, hey, what happens also if AI introduces inaccurate data? Can you tell us a little bit about like data manipulation and cleansing, especially in the world of AI?
Yeah, so I mean, we've all known this for years, right? If you put trash into your ERP, it gives you trash back out, right? AI is no different. If you don't feed it good data, it's not going to give you good insights. So you do, as I said before, you've got to spend the time and the effort to do that data cleansing. Okay, that doesn't mean that there aren't AIs that help you speed it up, because it is true. They can take a look at raw data and help you cleanse. If we talk about the simplest data, which would be like vendor master data, repetitive vendors, incorrect information, those types of things. Yes, the AI actually helps you speed up that cleanup. But at the end of the day, wherever your data is coming from, you have to have spent the time to do the cleansing, normalization, and validation before you start feeding it, and then make sure you have a process in place that maintains the data. It kind of gets back again to the screen. Companies like Tealbook, that's where they play, right? And maintain your data. Because if your data is wrong, and something as simple as person of contact could be a problem. So if you have a simple question, okay, I need to send out a code of conduct to all of my vendors. Sounds simple, but now the next step is, who do I send it to? Ooh, now you've got a big task to identify at each vendor the right person that's supposed to get this. Because you may or may not have a person of contact. It may be an accounts receivable, it may be an account rep, it may be somebody else. So those types of tasks, as simple as they sound, can take months and in excess of a year for a simple task. So if your data isn't maintained, simple tasks like that become a real uphill climb.
So the advice there is work on maintaining clean data that goes in. Don't rely on AI to fix and clean that for you, because it's mostly, as you said before, generative, and it's not going to, if you task it with curating something or relying on something that may not be there, that's when the inaccuracies occur. So you really want to focus on that data cleansing and integrity first. And we're out of time, unfortunately. So sorry about that, Kelly, for not being able to get to your final question. But Alan, this has been fantastic. I think that you've been able to walk us through so much more. I think that the people that were able to attend, we may have been clueless about AI and procurement walking into this, and you've enlightened so many people. Thank you so much. Do you have any final words, Alan, for, what do you, I guess, want to just finish off with? How can people get in touch with you if they need to? What are your final thoughts there?
Well, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to contact them. You can find me, for example, on LinkedIn. Just send me a message and we'll connect. If you have any questions, happy to chat with you. So yeah, the only thing I can tell you is that this is not the same as previous tech. It really is a revolution, not an evolution. You're going to see pretty radical changes, not only in our given career field, but all around us. You're going to see a lot of changes affected by AI in areas that we can't even figure out yet. So with that, I hope it was useful. And as I said, I'm happy to follow up with anybody who's interested.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That is the end of the session. We are going to be doing another one next month. So remember, this is a series of once a month webinars all around how do we see procurement? How do we humanize these connections? And Alan, you were fantastic. I loved how this turned out. And hopefully we'll even see you as an attendee in our next one. But thank you all for that we're able to participate and attend. And I'll see you on the next one. Have a great rest of your day.